Balaam was a prophet. God talked to Balaam. Balaam was known far and wide for his ability to communicate with the divine. People respected him and often sought his guidance on important matters. He lived a simple life, dedicated to listening to God's voice and sharing his messages with the people. Balaam's reputation as a man of God was well established, and he took his role very seriously. One day Balaam got a very important message. It was unlike any other message he had received before. The message came in the form of a scroll delivered by a royal messenger. Balaam's heart raced as he unrolled the scroll, eager to see what it contained. The words on the scroll were from none other than King Balak of Moab. It was from King Balak. The king wanted Balaam to do something. King Balak was troubled. He had heard about the Israelites and their journey through the land. The Israelites were numerous and powerful, and their presence made King Balak uneasy. He feared that they would take over his kingdom. In his desperation, King Balak turned to Balaam for help. He wanted Balaam to curse the Israelites. King Balak believed that a curse from Balaam would weaken the Israelites and give him the upper hand. He was willing to do whatever it took to protect his kingdom, even if it meant invoking a curse on an entire people. The request was shocking and put Balaam in a difficult position.
The Israelites are God's people. I shouldn't curse them. Balaam knew that the Israelites were under God's protection. Cursing them would go against everything he believed in and stood for. He was torn between the king's request and his duty to God. Balaam pondered deeply, knowing that his decision would have significant consequences.
But the king offered Balaam lots of money. The offer was tempting. King Balak promised Balaam a great reward if he agreed to curse the Israelites. The king's messengers brought sacks of gold coins and other valuable gifts, hoping to persuade Balaam. The wealth and luxury were beyond anything Balaam had ever imagined, and fancy gifts. Balaam really wanted those gifts. The allure of riches and the promise of a comfortable life were hard to resist. Balaam found himself in a moral dilemma. He desired the gifts, but he also knew that cursing the Israelites would be wrong. The conflict within him grew stronger as he weighed his options. Balaam decided to talk to God about it. In his moment of uncertainty, Balaam turned to the one source he trusted the most, God. He knelt in prayer, seeking guidance and clarity. Balaam knew that only God could provide the wisdom he needed to make the right decision. He prayed earnestly, asking God to show him the way and help him stay true to his faith. Balaam got ready to go see King Balak. He was a prophet, known for his ability to bless or curse people. King Balak, the ruler of Moab, was terrified of the Israelites who were camped near his land. He had heard of their victories and feared they would conquer his kingdom next. So he sent messengers to Balaam, offering him a handsome reward to come and curse the Israelites. Balaam, enticed by the promise of riches, decided to go. Even though he knew it was against God's will, he saddled up his donkey. This donkey was no ordinary animal. It had been with Balaam for many years and was known for its loyalty and intelligence. As Balaam prepared for the journey, he couldn't help but think about the wealth and honor that awaited him. The thought of gold, silver, and precious stones filled his mind, making him more determined to go against God's command. He was excited about the king's gifts. The idea of receiving such lavish rewards made his heart race. He imagined himself living in luxury with servants attending to his every need. The temptation was too great for Balaam to resist, and he convinced himself that he could somehow persuade God to change his mind. But God was not happy with Balaam. God had already told Balaam not to go with the messengers and not to curse the Israelites because they were blessed. However, Balaam's greed clouded his judgment, and he chose to disobey. God saw Balaam's heart and knew that he was more interested in the material rewards than in doing what was right.
I can't wait to see what the king will give me, Balaam thought to himself. He imagined the grand reception he would receive at the palace, the feasts, and the admiration of the people. He was so consumed by his desires that he ignored the warnings and signs from God.
God told Balaam no, but Balaam was determined to go. He thought he could outsmart God and find a way to get what he wanted. He believed that his skills and reputation as a prophet would somehow allow him to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Do not curse my people. But Balaam was stubborn. He had made up his mind and was not willing to listen to reason. His pride and arrogance blinded him to the consequences of his actions. He thought he knew better than God, and that he could handle whatever came his way. He really wanted those gifts. The allure of wealth and power was too strong for Balaam to resist. He convinced himself that he could find a way to please both God and King Balak, even though he knew deep down that it was impossible. So, Balaam started on his journey anyway. He set out with the messengers, his mind filled with thoughts of the riches that awaited him. He ignored the uneasy feeling in his heart and the warnings from God, believing that he could somehow make everything work out in his favor. He didn't listen to God. Balaam was so focused on his own desires that he couldn't see the danger ahead. He was blinded by his ambition and greed, and he refused to heed the warnings that God had given him. Balaam thought he knew better. He believed that his wisdom and experience as a prophet would allow him to navigate the situation successfully. He was confident that he could find a way to get what he wanted without facing any consequences. But God had a plan to stop Balaam. God knew that Balaam's heart was not in the right place, and he decided to intervene. He wanted to teach Balaam a lesson and show him that no one could go against his will and succeed. It involved a very special donkey. This donkey, who had been loyal to Balaam for many years, would play a crucial role in God's plan. The donkey had always been a faithful companion, and now it would become an instrument of God's will, showing Balaam the error of his ways and leading him back to the right path. Balaam rode along on his donkey. They came to a narrow path. Suddenly the donkey stopped. Balaam was confused. He couldn't see why the donkey stopped. Balaam kicked the donkey to make it go.
Get up!
But the donkey wouldn't move. Then the donkey did something amazing. The donkey spoke.
Why do you hit me?
Balaam was shocked. His donkey could talk. Balaam couldn't believe his ears. His donkey was talking. This was no ordinary day for Balaam. He had set out on a journey with a clear purpose, driven by the promise of riches and rewards from the king. But now, his trusted donkey, the very animal he had ridden countless times, was speaking to him. It was a moment of sheer astonishment, one that would be etched in his memory forever. But Balaam was so focused on the king's gifts. He still didn't understand. The allure of wealth and the promise of honor had clouded his judgment. He was blinded by his own desires, unable to see the bigger picture. The king's gifts were like a shimmering mirage, drawing him in and making him oblivious to the signs around him. He was so consumed by the thought of what he could gain that he failed to recognize the divine intervention taking place. He didn't see that God was trying to stop him. The path he was on was fraught with danger, not just for him, but for everyone involved. Yet, in his single-minded pursuit of the king's favor, he missed the warnings. The signs were all there, clear as day, but Balaam's vision was clouded. He was like a horse with blinders, seeing only what was directly in front of him and ignoring everything else. The divine messages, the subtle hints, all went unnoticed.
Why is this donkey so stubborn? Balaam wondered aloud, frustration evident in his voice. He couldn't fathom why his usually obedient donkey was acting so strangely. It was as if the animal had a mind of its own, refusing to move forward despite Balaam's commands. The more he thought about it, the more perplexed he became. What could possibly be causing this unusual behavior? Was there something he was missing?
Balaam just got angry at his donkey. His patience was wearing thin and his temper flared. He couldn't understand why his journey was being delayed, and his frustration turned into anger. The donkey, once a loyal companion, was now the target of his wrath. Balaam's anger blinded him further, making it even harder for him to see the truth. He was caught in a cycle of frustration and fury, unable to break free. He yelled at the donkey for being stubborn. His voice echoed through the air, filled with exasperation. The donkey, however, remained steadfast, unmoved by Balaam's outburst. It was as if the animal knew something that Balaam didn't, something important. But Balaam was too caught up in his own emotions to see it. He continued to shout, hoping that his anger would somehow make the donkey move. But the donkey stood its ground, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. He didn't even realize how silly he must have looked. To an outsider, the scene would have been almost comical, a grown man, red-faced and shouting at a donkey, oblivious to the absurdity of the situation. But to Balaam, it was anything but funny. He was too wrapped up in his own world, too focused on his own goals, to see the humor in it. He was a man on a mission, and nothing, not even a talking donkey, was going to stand in his way, yelling at a talking donkey. It was a scene straight out of a fable, a moment of pure surrealism. Balaam, a man of stature and importance, reduced to arguing with an animal, and not just any animal, but a talking donkey. It was a moment that should have made him pause, made him question everything. But Balaam was too far gone, too entrenched in his own desires to see the absurdity of it all. He was a man blinded by his own ambitions, unable to see the truth that was right in front of him.
There's an angel in the road. You can't see it, but I can.
Balaam couldn't see any angel. He thought his donkey was being silly.
Get moving!
Balaam got even angrier. He hit the donkey again, but the donkey wouldn't budge. It knew Balaam was in danger. God was getting Balaam's attention. Finally, God made Balaam see the angel too. The angel had a big sword. Balaam was scared. He fell down on the ground.
Please don't hurt me!
He begged the angel. The angel spoke to Balaam.
Why didn't you listen to God? This donkey saved your life.
Balaam was ashamed. He realized he had made a big mistake. Balaam finally listened. He realized he was wrong. He had been greedy and stubborn. The donkey was right. God was protecting him. Balaam was amazed by the talking donkey. He had never seen anything like it.
I'm sorry, God, I promise to obey.
He learned a very important lesson that day. God's ways are always best. Even a donkey could see that. Balaam turned around. He went back home. He didn't go to see King Balak. He knew he couldn't curse God's people. Balaam had learned his lesson. He would obey God, even when it was hard. The talking donkey had taught Balaam a lot.
God can use anything to speak to us, even a donkey.
Balaam also learned that God is in control. Balaam's story reminds us to listen to God. God knows what's best for us. Sometimes God might use surprising ways to get our attention. We should always try our best to obey him. Remember the talking donkey. It's a funny story, but it also teaches us about God's power and love. God is always with us, protecting us and guiding us on our journey. Please like, subscribe and share. Stay blessed in Jesus' name.